Hello and a very warm welcome to you all. This is the Great Books course of Ubiquity University, the first trimester of the year. And this is the second book of this first trimester. I'm sure you all attended and listened to Jim Garrison's wonderful presentation on Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. And today it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you, Dr. Renn Butler. He is one of the most brilliant PhD of Ubiquity University. He received his doctorate only 2 years ago, and his doctorate dissertation titled The Astrology, Archetypal Astrology and Transpersonal Psychology. It's a wonderful dissertation. If you have a chance to read it, please do so. Well, Renn started working with Stan Grof and Richard Tarnas probably around like 4 decades ago at the Asylum Institute. And since then, they still work together and study together. Renn became a holotropic breathwork facilitator and also conducts workshops and also offers consultations on archetypal astrology. He has published 3 books on Pathway to Wholeness and the Astrology of Love and Relationship and the Archetypal Universe. And it is really a wonderful news to announce to you all, in case you don't know it, that he is the director of the Grof Studies program in partnership with Ubiquity University. He is not just a brilliant PhD, but also a very, very kind person, because he has been working for the past, I don't know, 30, 40 years with the physically, mentally, emotionally challenged adults, predominantly in Victoria, British Columbia. Today, he's going to give us an insight and a lecture on Stan Grof's book, The Way of the Psychonaut. Well, I do believe that Stanislav Grof's work is just an amazing wonderful knowledge that should be really taught in not just in universities, but at least in high schools. So in case you don't know much of Stan's work, here is Dr. Renn Butler, and I will pass the word to him. We do, as always we do, he's going to give us maybe 50 to 60 minutes presentation. Then please feel free to share your comments or questions in the chat. And after his lecture, just you can put your hand up, or I can bring you in and ask your question from him as you wish. Now, over to you, dear Renn.
Thank you, Georgie. It's an honor to be here. Hello, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity and this quality time. So I noticed that they had volume 2 of The Way of the Psychonaut up on the poster, the e-poster. But if you want to read both volumes, if you have time, I would highly recommend them. This is volume 1 and volume 2. I helped edit these a few years back, and Brigitte Grof had the idea for this book as a way to collect in one place all of Stan Grof's most important writings and discoveries. So I think you'll find it to be a very valuable resource. Oh, still catching my breath here. We're getting ready for a big journey tomorrow. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen and show you the slideshow. I'm not sure how many of you there are out there. Just a moment.
He's the 22 of us, Renn.
Okay, great. That's kind of what he estimated. Thanks, Georgie. So here's a picture of Stan and Brigitte, and you can see that. Okay, Brigida is actually getting her PhD through Ubiquity University, and I just think the world of Jim and Georgie and Peter and their vision for Ubiquity University, and I think this is the wave of the future for higher education, this interdisciplinary approach. And okay, so for those of you who don't know, the word holotropic is from holos equals wholeness and tropane moving toward. The opposite of that is Grof also coined the term hylotropic, moving toward matter, hyle. I could uh, I could have just done a summary of each of the chapters in these books, but that would have been impossible in this short of time and probably also not that interesting. So I'm going to dive right into the most important elements of Stan's work in this slideshow, his expanded cartography of the human psyche. In the April presentation, part two, I'm going to focus on his insights from his book, The Cosmic Game, which he also talks about in one of the chapters in The Way of the Psychonaut. So it's kind of from the clinical direction today, and then in April, more from the cosmic direction. What are the motives of the cosmic creative principle for creating the physical multi-cosmos in the first place? That's a question that is not often asked. Ervin Laszlo certainly explores that. We had a great time reading his book recently in our holotropic worldview class. This is a great book for people undergoing spiritual emergency. It's a good resource for you. So non-ordinary states of consciousness have played a central role in the spiritual life of humanity, going back at least 30,000 years. That shamans began their healing work through a spontaneous or induced experience of death and rebirth. And they explored territories of the psyche that transcend the boundaries of normal individual awareness. And I want to mention, we'll wait till we get to that slide. In the rites of passage, initiates were guided into non-ordinary states and had a personal experience of higher realms that transcend the physical world. In the ancient mystery religions of the Mediterranean, neophytes participated in various mind-expanding processes in order to move beyond the limits of individual awareness and experience directly the sacred or numinous dimensions of existence. The celebrated mother goddess mysteries of Eleusis, for example, which were held near Athens for almost 2,000 years, we are now virtually certain used ergot, a naturally occurring form of LSD. And I have a very exciting announcement. Several colleagues in the Grof breathwork, holotropic breathwork community, and I are organizing a 7-day and a 3-day workshop, followed by 2 excursions in Greece in October. Be a week on the island of Aegina, and then 3 days at Eleusis itself. This is a rather fanciful drawing of what Eleusis might have looked like. And the hotel at Eleusis where we'll be breeding, the Elefsina Hotel, is a 5-minute walk from these sacred ruins. So I hope some of you could join us. If you happen to see it on my website, the Greek retreat page, it's not ready yet. It should be ready within about 5 days. So it's still in the process. So this is Demeter, the mother goddess, and this originally the mysteries took place in this cave, and then they built this elaborate telestrion. So many cultures have also used methods such as trance dancing, drumming, sensory overload and sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, breathing maneuvers, fasting, meditation, and other techniques to enter holotropic states. All of these do the same thing. They weaken the executive functions control, the ego's control over our psyche, and allow the unconscious material to flood into consciousness. And so there are essentially two major directions in psychology or approaches. There are uncovering processes, all of these would fit in that category, and covering processes, which would be antidepressants, antipsychotics, various maneuvers in the mind to try to get control of the psyche. So just some of the issues in psychedelic therapy and self-exploration. So psychedelics, Grof writes, are non-specific amplifiers of mental and emotional processes. The experience doesn't come from the chemical. It comes from our own unconscious. 10 people on doing the same amount of LSD or psilocybin on the same day could have 10 totally different experiences. The most important factor in positive outcomes is the level of trust and support. Now, some issues in set and setting. Recreational set is how many people first get exposed to psychedelics, doing it at a party or a dance. Mystical set, a little more conscious approach. People become more mature. They might decide to do it in nature or maybe with a group of friends. And the idea is to have an experience different than usual, maybe connect with nature, connect with the numinous feeling inside the psyche. The ceremonial set, I'm sure many of you have had this experience, ayahuasca ceremonies, maybe yopo ceremonies or other psychedelics. This is more intentional yet. It would be usually a shaman and maybe assistants. There could be drumming or chanting. There's a relatively higher degree of safety in these situations, but what is lacking is really individualized support. It's a more of a wholesale kind of set where there might be spoken or unspoken limits to what a person could experience, like yelling or screaming or the sexual feelings or a need for physical support of physical contact, unmet needs from infancy and childhood. It's possible that those things might fall outside of the purview or the sort of acceptable range of experiences in these kind of group ceremonies. The main advantage is that they are less expensive. What I'm most drawn to is the therapeutic or internalized set, and the psycholytic approach is smaller dosages of psychedelics as an adjunct to psychotherapy, to verbal counseling therapy, and then higher dosages would fall within psychedelic therapy. And I could also call this the Grofian set. It's done with eye shades and headphones. The client is lying down, and they would ideally have a male and female dyad support. This is a very safe way to do it. It really maximizes the benefits and minimizes the risks. So those of you who haven't had that experience, highly recommend creating that opportunity for yourself. Rick Doblin was in the first certification class in 1988 of holotropic breathwork, and he was so trained by Stan Grof, and a lot of the protocols that Stan and his colleagues had arrived at through trial and error in the 50s and 60s were then adopted by the MAPS protocols, and that is poised possibly as early as August with decriminalization or legalization of MDMA as a psychiatric prescription medicine to spread widely, and that will be a fantastic blessing for humanity. And then criminal set, the administration of any psychedelic substance to anyone without their knowledge. It's very damaging. Okay, medical and psychiatric contraindications. I won't go into this too deeply, but you just should know that if you are working in this field, you have to screen for for some medical issues. The most significant ones would be cardiovascular disease, serious heart problems, or very high blood pressure, but there are some other ones. So just be careful and responsible in this work. Psychiatric contraindications. Now, Stan worked with patients in every category of diagnosis and had great results. That he had very good results, ranging from good to extremely good, and but he had an inpatient facility. They were doing one session a week, one high dose session a week. He was sitting for each one of his clients, his patients, until they were healed. And people with bipolar disorder could be a risk with that diagnosis, because of the possibility of acting out in between sessions, maybe wanting to defy gravity or speed limits or things like that. They would really ideally be in an inpatient facility where they could be watched over and supervised. And if that kind of care is available, he was able to observe 100% healing of people with this condition. This is software in the psyche. It's not a problem with brain chemistry, as what his research essentially proved. People with a history of hospitalization, psychiatric hospitalization, or serious emotional problems may also require inpatient facility. He worked with 4 people with schizophrenic psychosis, and all of them ended up more healed than the average person. And so again, these are healable conditions, but he did 90 sessions with one of his clients. So think about that. If you get over optimistic about working with people with severe problems, she was still psychotic after the 89th session. And after 90, her problems disappeared, and he's kept in touch with her, and she's in a good place. So, okay, Stan was able, through his 4,000 sessions that he sat for, and access to the records of 2,000 more of his colleagues. Originally, it was 3,000 sessions, but he's done sessions since his first publications. So the biographical, the perinatal, and the transpersonal. Now, this is really useful information for human beings, and especially for psychonauts and for those of you who hope to sit for others as therapists. Grof found that the unconscious has these 3 major layers. So the first layer, the personal unconscious, or biographical, from infancy to the present. And these contain the usual psychotraumas, which we'll briefly review, which most therapists would be familiar with. Below that, as self-exploration continues, people automatically experience confrontations with birth and death. And he calls this the perinatal, or surrounding the birth layer of the unconscious. And below that are the transpersonal realms, and these are some of the major categories. These lines are called what he termed coex systems, systems of condensed experience. They're memory systems. There are both positive ones and negative ones. Positive ones could involve, memories of personal successes, happy times in the family life, and deepen into the experience of rebirth, escaping from the birth canal. And then there could be nourishing karmic constellations in the collective unconscious. The negative ones could involve situations of ridicule or humiliation or physical or sexual abuse. These would be connected with one of the negative perinatal matrices, which I'll talk about, and then have some deeper transpersonal roots like a archetype, past life memory, ancestral or racial memory. So many people's clinical conditions or symptoms have roots in at least the biographical and the perinatal, and many also have even deeper roots in the transpersonal realms. And in order to have truly effective healing, we have to keep the inner archaeological quest going, to pursue it as deep as it needs to go until we get to the bottom of the symptoms. And purely verbal approaches to psychotherapy might help with some of the biographical traumas, but are relatively ineffective in dealing with especially the perinatal layer, with very intense volcanic energies and emotions. So this is Freud's view of the human mind, and this was the unconscious for him. But remember that this entire iceberg for Freud, part of which is conscious and part of which is unconscious, was still just the top of this now expanded cartography. Freud did not understand the importance of birth or the transpersonal realms. Okay, so we'll just review these briefly. The biographical layer of the psyche, physical and sexual abuse, a hostile family atmosphere, sibling rivalry. These are some of the most common problems that people could bring to therapy. Severe toilet training, serious illnesses, operations, or accidents. These kind of physical traumas are very important and have yet to be integrated in any of the other major psychological schools. People can relive tonsillectomies, operations, even those where you're under full anesthetic. People can relive those experiences and realize that those were traumatic and had a limiting, constricting effect in the overall experience of life until they've been fully experienced and processed through. Unmet needs for warm human contact, and then positive ones, harmonious periods in family life, fulfilling romantic relationships, blissful experiences in nature, personal breakthroughs and accomplishments, and others. So that's the biographical layer. Now the perinatal layer, birth and death, and also rebirth and transcendence. And Grof observed that these experiences from the perinatal layer tend to surface in 4 relatively distinct clusters or groupings of experience, which he called the basic perinatal matrices. And then even deeper than the perinatal are the transpersonal experiences, and some of the most common are embryonic memories, sperm and ovum consciousness, ancestral, racial, collective, and phylogenetic memories. Jung did not speak of phylogenetic memories, I don't think, but the ancestral, racial, and collective memories we could call the Jungian historical unconscious. And Jung was considered the first transpersonal psychologist or psychiatrist of the modern era, though Grof actually coined the term in 1968. Jung did not talk about past life experiences or did not document them. There can be identification with other people or groups of people, identification with the consciousness of a specific animal, plant, or inorganic material, identification with all of life or all of creation, then archetypal and mythological sequences that transcend the space-time continuum altogether. And then the ultimate experiences are experiences of the universal mind, absolute consciousness, or the macrocosmic void. And this macrocosmic or supracosmic void is what Ervin Laszlo refers to as the akashic or A field, or sometimes the holo field. So the perinatal layer. Let's go a little more in depth into this. Now, Rick Tarnas, Grof's close friend and colleague at Esalen and my astrology mentor and friend, was able to realize that the the classic meanings of the four outer planetary archetypes in astrology of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto correspond in very detailed, clear ways with the qualities that Grof observed in his patients of the four perinatal matrices. So this was two different streams of research, the long ancient astrological one. Well, these were all Uranus, Neptune, Pluto since 1791. Uranus was discovered. And Grof's clinical research. And then I would add in a third stream of research, and that was Jung's research in number symbolism in dreams. And I talk about this in my book, The Archetypal Universe, dream symbolism. The numbers associated with 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are very common in dreams, correspond to the qualities that Grof observed in these four perinatal matrices, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that is a total coincidence. Grof didn't organize these perinatal matrices according to a predetermined plan. And Jung, for example, those of you familiar, the number 4 in people's dreams, Jung observed, corresponds to experiences of breakthrough, individuation, connection with the self or reconnection with the self, a sense of rebirth. And this is corroborated by experiences from Grof's basic perinatal matrix 4, corresponding to the completed delivery, and experiences of unity. One of something in a dream is often connected, Jung observed, with feelings of connection, higher meaning, dissolution of boundaries, unity. And that's exactly fits the nature of the good womb experiences that Grof observed, union with the mother. There's a lot of avenue here for exciting research in dream symbolism, and Grof's work added to Jung's already great work, really completes the picture, I would say, because psychedelics are so much more powerful than dream work. You're studying the same material. It's the unconscious, but it's like a telescope that's, 10 to 100 times more powerful. It's just a rough kind of metaphor that I'm using to describe the potency of psychedelic states. Okay, so basic perinatal matrix 1, blissful oceanic feelings, a sense of no boundaries, experiences of cosmic unity, perception of higher meaning, and connected with the archetype of Neptune's, connected with the universal field of consciousness. Ultimately, it's the Akashic field or holo field, the empty yet all-containing void that has all information and pattern and meaning and impulse within it. So why do people who are living good womb memories have images of jellyfish, whales, plankton, or other serene aquatic life forms? Grof coins this term symbolic logic because they all share the same feeling of peace, of serenity, of no boundaries, the consciousness of the ocean. There's no boundaries in the ocean, just like the fetus consciousness is still connected with the universal field of consciousness. Its awareness is all over the place. And so this is a very helpful for understanding the symbolism of dreams and psychedelic sessions, and then tying them in these clusters that Grof calls the perinatal matrices. Also syndromes of symptoms, like why, for example, people could have headaches and also feelings of nausea and anxiety. They go together. All of these things emerged in the dynamic stage of birth labor, where the fetus's head is being pressed into the narrow pelvic opening. There's activation of powerful, aggressive energies, threat to life, and there can be confrontation with biological materials resulting in nausea. And so it's very important discoveries. So the consciousness of outer space is also no boundaries. So these fetal experiences can open out into these. Grof calls this oceanic ecstasy or melted ecstasy. And reaching these states is the goal of mysticism, right? Reaching a state of union with the divine, with all things, with all there is, with nature, other people, and so on. And it's also the goal of transpersonal psychology to open or widen the pathway to the divine consciousness. A good metaphor that Stan uses is verbal approaches to therapy could be likened to ladling out a swamp one spoonful at a time. In transpersonal psychology, there's still a lot of communication and, especially before and after sessions. But the overall approach is like digging a trench from that swamp to the ocean, allowing the divine ocean to come in and completely cleanse the old structures of the ego and renew and revitalize them. Images of heavens and paradises from various cultures from around the world, relatively independent of people's beliefs or culture of origin. And Grof felt this was something like laboratory proof of Jung's idea of the collective unconscious. We now have access to the entire pantheon of deities of humanity and all the archetypal terrains, the heavens, paradises, hells, purgatories, from all times and places. And these can emerge in people's sessions, and that is different than what it used in the previous situation. All the artists in a certain geographic location at a certain time would seem to receive the same visions. People, at Eleusis, 2,000 years ago, seemed to have experiences of Persephone being reborn, and it was a relatively constant or consistent part of their rebirth experience, like that perinatal experience of being reborn. But the partitions in the collective psyche have now lifted. And I think this process began around the middle of the 19th century. This is when ideas from India began to flood into Euro-American culture. The transcendentalists, the discovery of Neptune right around that same time, and then synchronistically the development of the railroad, which connected the entire northern hemisphere not long after that point for the first time in human history. So this sort of beginning of a reconnected global village or Homo sapiens identity. She had Neptune conjunct her moon when she drew this beautiful mandala after a holotropic breathwork session. Kundalini Mother during the great Uranus-Neptune conjunction of the 1990s from a breathwork session. Now, people can also experience toxic womb sequences. The mother was under stress, was not being supported, or she had medical issues or drug or alcohol abuse, or really did not want to be pregnant. Then people can experience this and have to face this in their sessions. There's a finite amount of all of these things, so these can be completely worked through and consumed from the psyche just by having the experience. Okay, the second perinatal matrix, the water breaks, the uterine walls begin to contract around the fetus, but the cervix is still closed, so there's no way out of this situation. What was an all encompassing and nourishing, unconditionally positive milieu for many infant fetuses suddenly becomes a kind of torture chamber. And this is connected with feelings of no exit, compression, constriction, hopelessness, helplessness, a very powerful clinical root of endogenous type of depression, inhibited type of depression, where people have no interest in anything, no motivation. They just feel everything's hopeless. And so facing this is essentially one of the most important elements in the cure of that type of depression. The process can begin with descent into a whirlpool or maelstrom, the onset of death, because once consciousness is tied to the body, the constricting uterine walls press consciousness into the body. It's not connected with the entire universal field anymore. And once we are tied to the body, then we are on a one-way trajectory to death, mortality, because that organism will die after a certain number of years. People can identify with being constricted or constrained or engulfed by a monstrous octopus or tarantula or whale, things like that. The fall from paradise, expulsion. Even atheists can have these kinds of experiences and flash on Yahweh's words to Eve was that in pain and sorrow shall thou bring forth children. This connection with loss of paradise and childbirth. But what the patriarchs didn't realize is that losing paradise is an absolutely necessary part of the process in order to incarnate into the world of duality. That's the realm we live in, the realm of duality. And the knowledge of good and evil that Eve was supposedly tempted by is exactly what needs to happen in order to leave the unity of the divine and go out into the samsara of incarnation. And the problem is not that that happens, but that in these monotheistic or patriarchal religions, they lost the opportunities for experiential practices where people could complete the birth process, heal the leftovers, fully face it, and then get in touch with the ecstatic rebirth at the end of this process and coming into the world, and then the positive womb memories. When you don't have access to these healing techniques, then you just would tend to project on the feminine as your negative feelings about incarnation. That's the feminine that brought us into the world. But when people can heal those perinatal leftovers, then they realize that incarnation is essentially the divine having a human experience. Yeah, there's suffering, but overall, we can have a reconnection with the timeless, the infinite and eternal divine, and know that that is the true nature of reality, and that all the vicissitudes of material life are just kind of adventures. But when they forbid the experiential practices at Eleusis, for example, they were suppressed by the monotheism. Then life is worse. People are unhealed, life does become worse. So it's a vicious circle. So various hells people can access in their sessions. These are the worst experiences that a human being can have. Grof writes these BPM2 experiences. So people need a lot of support in sessions, and this will tend to be more accessible during heavy Saturn transits. And there's a Saturn-Neptune world transit in the sky beginning this month, toward the end of this month. Check out our YouTube channel, Archetypal News Network, ANN. We have timely videos there with Tarnas' approach to archetypal astrology, and we'll be talking a lot about that Saturn-Neptune, and there are already videos there about it. Identification with the suffering of human groups throughout history. The world as an impersonal, soulless, mechanical place, and then images from mythology like Chronos, in other words, time, chronology, devouring his children. Tantalos. So the third perinatal matrix, the death rebirth struggle. Here, the cervix is open and the long, slow propulsion down the birth canal begins with powerful uterine contractions that oscillate between 50 and 100 pounds. So confrontations with the shadow side of human nature. Here in sessions, people identify not only with victims, but now also with the perpetrators at the same time. They can alternate, oscillate, or blend it together. We begin to identify with the mother's contracting body and the forces that are driving the fetus down the birth canal and out into new life. And so we can begin to cooperate with this divine feminine that is giving birth to us at this point by doing the sessions and going in the direction that it wants us to go, which is full experiences of the energies and emotions that are activated. A sense of there being a finite amount of suffering, feelings of moving toward light at the end of the tunnel. The situation is not hopeless. There's a feeling more like purgatory that we are moving closer and closer to the light. Shadow material. So people can have experiences of aggression and images, battle scenes from mythology or from history. Powerful explosive discharges of aggression are a very standard feature of breathwork sessions and psychedelic sessions if the therapist supports it and there's a soundproof room, and if you are not allowing this in your counseling work or your sitting work, you're really missing out on powerful therapeutic mechanisms that can decrease or eliminate the effects of aggression in people's everyday lives. Mythological battle scenes. Tiger Man, the sort of the shadow that is inside of each of us. Okay, people can also experience sexual energies, which this is one of the more, unique and interesting of Stan's discoveries, that the blood supply to the fetus comes through a vein which goes into its heart, and that's the umbilical cord, and the blood carrying, oxygen carrying blood, and that's fed by arteries wound through the uterine wall. So every time there's a contraction, that cuts or diminishes the flow of blood and oxygen, and that's experienced as suffocation. And we know that this creates a type of enforced sexual arousal. We know this from autoerotic asphyxiation, people who are hanged, who can exhibit sexual arousal and so on. So the fact that our first sexual experience happens in the birth canal in the context of life-threatening suffocation and activation of aggression, Grof found a very powerful and logical clinical root of sadomasochism, this mixtures of sex and aggression that cause so much suffering for humanity when these energies are acted out. In sessions, you can experience the same energies and emotions, but you're experiencing them in a therapeutic context where no one is being hurt. There's no karma being created. And I'm not saying that is what's happening in a consensual S&M situation, but the way that the sexual violence that is so rampant is certainly very horrible and traumatic. And so it's where it happens that makes all the difference. This very unique desire to cover one's head here is very perinatally suggestive. So the art of Giger can really uncanny capacity to capture many of the perinatal themes. So the problem of evil and the relationship between good and evil, these sequences eventually deepen into confrontations with negative archetypal energies or wrathful deities. Grof calls these themes the demonic. And like everything in the psyche, full surrender to it automatically consumes it from the system. These negative archetypal energies are not happy being stuck in the human psyche. It's essentially divine energy, which was twisted during the process of great suffering, such as the birth process. And when people relive that, then those energies go back to the divine or transmuted back into the unified, field of light. So, evil is a subset of the light, and in sessions, good always wins. There's always a happy, positive ending. If it's not positive, then it's not the end yet. We just haven't gone through enough to reach the positive resolution. And again, Giger, these kind of symmetrical images are very common in psychedelic sessions. So people can have scatological experiences. I talked about confrontation with biological materials in the birth canal. People could be retching. There could be a lot of nausea, projectile vomiting. Also, images of decaying corpses, and people have a very visceral sense of the fate of the body, the biological decomposition. And then the acting out of these scatological unhealed materials. People think it's normal to create the soil, our nest of our precious biosphere, because they went through these kind of scatological experiences, which then led to birth. So they somehow think that it's part of the process until they've worked through those memories. And then finally, pyrocatharsis, or purifying fire. The fire seems to have magical qualities, purifying everything that is rotten and corrupt in the journey or souls and preparing them for rebirth. People can identify with blasting rockets, volcanoes. Grof calls this type of ecstasy volcanic ecstasy, or Dionysian type of ecstasy. So some of this might seem new to some people, but Stan points out that each of the major BPM-3 themes that we just discussed has clear manifestations in the outer world. The aggressive side of BPM-3 can be seen in the Earth's long history of war, conflict, and terrorism. Kind of murderous aggression, very powerful perinatal roots. The sexual element is taking both positive and negative forms in erotic emancipation, very positive, as well as in sexual violence and exploitation. Demonic themes are evident in acts of insatiable greed and cruelty around the world, and the scatological dimension in the ongoing degradation of our environment, and in a more symbolic way as economic and political corruption. And finally, and I haven't heard Stan mention this, I would add that unfaced pyrocathartic elements could be seen as manifesting in the dual threats of nuclear holocaust and global warming, or addiction to fossil fuels. There are clear counterparts of each of these external problems in the psyche, and consciousness research suggests that confronting them internally will help lead to a dramatic reduction of their effects in the outer world. I'm about 5 minutes away, George. I hope that's okay. So basic perinatal matrix 4, rebirth and separation from the mother. This is connected with individuation that Jung talked about. So the separation from the mother, by that he means biological separation. After the cutting of the umbilical cord, the newborn becomes an autonomous biological unit. So a profound sense of decompression, opening, and awakening, ecstatic feelings of rebirth, renewal, redemption, and forgiveness, feelings of planetary citizenship and universal brotherhood and sisterhood. These emerge automatically when the arrow of suffering is healed, pulled out of the psyche by fully experiencing those leftover traumas. Suffering can intensify during these powerful Uranus transits. Identification with Christ, the boundaries between us and the divine can begin to open as flows of energy are now free to come through again, sort of coming apart feelings from psychedelic sessions. And then the victory of the spiritual impulse, Shiva successfully bringing about ego death for that session. A beautiful moment when this happens. She had Uranus conjunct Mars, an artist who did holotropic breathwork, giving birth to a new self. And this blessed reunion with the mother and with the divine feminine, with divine light. Peacock feathers can appear in spectra patterns. And this is one of Stan's paintings during a transit of the Uranus-Pluto of the 1960s, was squaring his natal Venus. He moved. You see the pyrocatharsis in the mother's spine, and he's coming out and into the realm of Saraswati, the divine mother. Inside of giant halls and cathedrals that represent the opening of space, decompression. After the compression on the head, then there's an opening into this infinity and eternity, which is the true generic state of consciousness, back into the hollow field. The ending of wars or revolutions, end of, the end of the Cold War, or that cycle, can appear in people's visions. The sort of souls coming out of the underworld. Oops, sorry, that's beautiful. Rebirth mandala. Christina Grof painted that years ago. People can identify with Osiris being reborn, Dionysus, Persephone coming out of the underworld, Christ, dying, reviving gods and goddesses. They can reconnect with the divine feminine, in the form of Isis, Demeter, Lakshmi, Parvati, Mary, or others. With God, the divine in a more abstract form, such as light. The world appears fresh and new and reborn. And what a moment in a session when you take off your eye shades and headphones at the end and get to go outside for the first time. And these are ecstatic moments. Excuse me. Okay, I just have one or two more slides. Feelings of planetary citizenship. So these intrinsic human values that Stan observed emerge automatically in people after they have healed their perinatal material. And this was a very optimistic discovery. It confirms that the basic nature of the human being is good, helpful, cooperative, loving, but also critical attitudes toward the abuse of power. People just don't become mushy. They can still recognize when someone's on a power trip, and they will be critical toward that. But these wonderful feelings, heightened vitality and enthusiasm, desire to live closer to nature, heightened ecological sensitivity. Ecological values don't have to be taught. They emerge automatically in people. Feelings of kindness and compassion, reduction of greed and aggression. These are very desirable qualities in people, and people also become more themselves. They become better or healed versions of themselves. People don't all become the same. They become more uniquely expressive of their own unique talents. So these kind of feelings of brotherly and sisterly feelings. And I'll skip that one. Perinatal perceptions in common speech, returning to the womb, going down the tubes, the world closing in, choking under pressure, getting shit-faced, and rebirth. And then you can come back and look at these birth by elective cesarean if you'd like. The different emergency cesarean and elective cesarean are different patterns. Okay, I'll skip that one as well. Okay. I am done my slideshow. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. That's a 2-hour slideshow condensed into 55 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I just couldn't take my eyes off from the screen. Thank you so much for this really rich presentation. Wow. But before I get into my comments and question, two things. Where do we find information on the October trip?
The best way is to subscribe to my mailing list on my website. I only send out about 4 notices a year, and it's on right here. The pages, it's almost done. It's like Greek retreats. It's on my website as well, but don't sign up yet. We're still working things out.
Oh, okay.
But we'd love it if people wanted to come. Imagine breathing at Eleusis itself. It's truly, the end of an era there.
I would love to come, definitely.
Wow.
The other is please put the link for the Archetypal News Network with Rick Tarnas,
Yes, I will.
because I think that's another useful information for us all.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm just getting that
Wonderful.
while we're talking.
Well, wow, as you're talking, it's just there are so many crisscrossing thoughts and feelings for me that how mystical and mysterious we are, how much we do and do not know about ourselves. And thank goodness for Stan Grof and Jung and all these, and yourself as well, for really highlighting and outlining that who we really are and how important it is to get to know ourselves. Thank you for that. A few things that triggered me. I try not to keep it too long because I'm sure our audience would like to participate. One of the things is when you were talking about the psychiatric contradiction that healable conditions, and you mentioned that Stan has worked with those psychologically challenged people that they are, in psychiatric hospitals. But has he actually met one or even more than one where his help, his holotropic approach did not work, or have you?
Well, he carefully screened people ahead of time, and he felt, he picked patients that he felt that he had a good connection with and trust, and they had to have some degree of insight. Paranoia is a very difficult starting point. If the client has right off the bat a sense that they're being persecuted by the therapist, that's not a good basis. So he didn't work with everybody, but people that he felt were promising. The one category, Georgie, that he observed the poorest clinical outcomes were severe obsessive compulsive neurotics. Even after ego death experiences, they would sometimes show minimal improvement in their conditions. There could be a long-term fear of defecating in a session, which could for them present a barrier to the ecstatic experiences. But later on in Maryland, Baltimore, I think 71 or 72, he worked with a severe obsessive compulsive young man, and he defecated in his session and then played with it in a deeply regressed state. And Stan and his colleagues were amazed at his clinical improvement after that.
Wow, incredible.
So,
Incredible.
so Stan thinks that it's possible that they didn't allow give the same permission to those people that they gave to people who were afraid of urinating in
Mhm.
sessions. They told them it's okay, just urinate. If it happens, it happens. And sometimes they might even wear a brief. But yeah.
Wow. Because I was really intrigued that, would, in my naive mind, I really thought that the holotropic breath work really works for everybody, especially for those who are mentally challenged. And of course, we know that some of our mentally challenged, they are misdiagnosed. But then again, their state can be so misunderstood, and can be quite difficult to work with. But kudos really to him and to his colleagues and you as well for try to help, because there just in my radar, I know so many people who actually suffer of bipolar, they'd say disease or whatever, and I would really hope that holotropic breathwork would offer healing to these people, or alignment or coherence.
Yes, it has a lot of potential, but unfortunately, they will probably have to wait until there are inpatient facilities where
Yeah,
they can
right.
go after the session.
Ah,
There's also a legal risk, somebody
ah,
diagnosed with bipolar, anything that they do for the rest of their lives could potentially be blamed on like the psychedelic therapy or the breath work. So it's
yeah,
a risk. Um,
absolutely.
so
Yeah, yeah. But then again, as we know that the so-called medicine that some of these people get, that actually, it's actually makes the situation worse than better.
I
But maybe
know.
I shouldn't say this publicly. Actually, we don't want to be cancelled because of that, but I stand for my opinion. The next thing is I'd like to ask, as you were going through the amazing presentation, and at the BPM second stage, when was something, there was a word that I didn't see, that it's claustrophobia. Could some people experience later in life claustrophobia, because that is that stage when that there is that pressure, that closeness, there is that no exit you were talking about.
Yes, he did find that was the root of claustrophobia.
Okay.
And when the BPM2 material emerges, then it becomes quite intense. And then they experience the rebirth, and then that symptom disappears.
Ah, yeah. Because I do have that, and I was always wondering where that actually comes from. And maybe I need to do another holotropic session. I already had done one, and that was just super amazing. The other thing that was an aha moment for me, when you revealed the sexual experience at birth. Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that, and how much effect it has on people. Incredible. And you did say, and that kind of like caught my attention as well, that the self-destructive attitude of humankind. Do you think that stems from that stage of the being born?
Uh, yeah, a lot of destructive and self-destructive and suicidal impulses come from unprocessed birth trauma, because
Wow.
when we're reliving that, we're in a kind of an ego death process. The divine is trying to overcome our boundaries so we can awaken back into the peaceful, unified field. But it's an intense process, and so there's this destructive energy that's happening, and people could act that out or fight against it, aim it at other people, and aim it at Mother Nature. the feminine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Even the whole patriarchal mindset we could see as a kind of an attempt to try to get on top of the forces of birth and death, which are usually described as feminine. Even death in mythologies around the world, and for the Greeks, the three fates, the three female fates were higher even than Zeus. And so the ego doesn't want to be subject to powerful forces that can take away our lives at will whenever they want. And so there's a desire to get on top of that, but
Yeah.
it's really impoverished the quality of human life.
Incredible. Thank
Yeah.
you. I think humankind should be, I think everybody should be prescribed to go to at least one holotropic sessions, at least. Really, we would be maybe more peaceful race, but then again, for that we need to grow to that understanding. And thank you. Well, we have many. I know many names. I'm just looking at the attendees, and I know some of these people have strong opinions. I was wondering if Dr. Michelle Blair, would she like to comment? Or, oh, she just put her hand up. Oh, okay, there. I'm going to bring you in. Auto. Okay, I haven't done that before. There you go. Hello, Michelle.
Am I on? I don't see me.
No, I don't know. I'm not sure that I can switch the camera on. Sorry, I'm not
No, no
technologically
problems.
savvy.
I'm not either. Renn, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. That was it's sparked my interest to dive in a little more with the holotropic breathing work. I do have a question for you because I just finished my dissertation and doctorate this last year, and one of my focuses was on the instinctual feminine, and specifically in Texas culture, but looking at through a Jungian lens. And I'm curious about psychedelics or holotropic breathing and how maybe that would relate to I guess helping us to reconnect with our instincts, because like you said earlier in your presentation about the mechanistic or the monotheism ideologies and how they've really damaged our psyche in so many ways or cut us off from our um our own divinity. And instincts, according to Anne Baring, it's the language of the soul. So how in your work, because I find that we are so atrophied in our instincts, or people don't trust themselves, and specifically women, because we live in a world that's always telling us not to be who we are. So it's a question, please.
Yes. Well, I think it's partly because in the Christian era, and you can understand why, they tried to emphasize love and light, New Testament. And those are the best things, and those are great ideals. But the shadow side is still wreaking havoc in our world. We still have the same emotions in our psyches that we did in the Stone Age. So I think it's partly we don't have an appreciation for the fact that there's a finite amount of shadow material in the individual layer of the psyche, and that we can go into those demonic and aggressive and sadomasochistic scatological materials without anyone being hurt. We can face it in a session. And a subset of that is the divine feminine has a shadow side as well, right? Just like the, the cosmic masculine has a shadow side. And, the archetypes Kali, Lilith would be embodiments of that, expressions of that. And so it's important that people have permission to go into those kinds of states of consciousness as well, and not just have to be sweet and, demure. So I would, yeah.
And I had one other question, and that's related to the Gnostics, because I've done quite a bit of reading on the Nag Hammadi and how we misunderstand, or many people misunderstand the Gnostics, who are destroyed by the early Christian church, ironically, because they really wanted people to be fully human in their human faculty of what they would call nous, or that which should be a divine intelligence, and how to connect with nature. So it wasn't necessarily that they didn't hate nature. They were actually trying to bring you to your deepest self. And I was just curious about how you would look at this, what they call the nous, or that divine faculty, versus this idea that maybe you see in Judeo-Christian about the divine spark. Because my understanding from the Gnostics, it was a different faculty to bring, I guess you might say, online, or to develop.
Oh, I don't know. I've read the Gnostic Gospels and they had a big influence on me. And, I'm aware of Gnostic dualism. But I don't know enough about that particular nuances to be able to answer that question.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, Paolo, would you like to, do you have any comments or questions? I'd like to hear from you if you are willing to share. But I think he may have disappeared from the airwaves.
I just want to respond to what Michelle
Please.
said just briefly. Our attitude toward nature dramatically improves when we've cleared out the perinatal leftovers. Nature is in the realm of the feminine, mother nature, the physical material matter, mother realm. And people automatically develop a sense of the being an integral part embedded in the ecosystems, and a desire to try to cooperate with it rather than destroy it and conquer it.
Thank you. Do we have anybody from our audience who would like to share? Dave, for example, anything you would like to add? Or Laura, Masvidal, any of you? Terrio, wonderful.
Yes, hello. Wow, great presentation. Thank you so much, Renn, Georgie. It was pretty amazing for me, your description of the BPM-3. It's been a long, long time, but I was a bit of a psychonaut without any training or without any guidance in my youth. And you described one of the most cosmic experiences I ever had with psilocybin mushrooms that I sort of self-administered, and then went walking in a field, and I experienced all of those things, from defecating on myself, throwing up, experiencing hell, and then going through it all and coming into like rebirth and feeling the most amazing I'd ever felt in my whole life. And I've always tried to understand it, and you just gave a whole nother level of meaning to that. And it was pretty amazing to hear. And I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into the book. And I love the work you're doing. I did get to experience some holotropic breath work back in the 90s when I was living in Hawaii, and had another pretty amazing experience. So it's really nice to see this becoming more available, I think. So thank you for all of you. Thank you, Georgie, for the work with Ubiquity to make it, give the training. And thank you, Renn, for all your work. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Welcome. Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, thank you. Renn, would you mind to actually expand a little bit on Sue's question and your response to it, because it's quite profound. So the cesarean surgery at birth. So you say that transpersonal experience come from sources beyond the body, but then again, you do talk about the birthing experience as well. So in what would you give percentage in terms of when we are born comes from the transpersonal experience, yet at the same time, or added to it, the birthing experience? So in what percentage do they become that whole experience?
Well, I mean, these coex systems, these memory systems, they would have very powerful perinatal components, and then they usually have transpersonal roots too. So I can pull up my slides on the cesarean births. That would probably be the simplest way to answer that. There's no short answer to the cesarean.
No? Okay. I don't know. Well, Susu is interested. I'm interested, if you don't mind, if you still have time. Yes, please. That's what
I do. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, transpersonal experiences can really change our worldview, and they're very powerful, and we have a sense when they're happening that they're deeper than even the perinatal layer. But they can also sometimes have a bit of a bloodless quality. Um, a lot of the dramatic healing comes from processing out, abreacting the perinatal energies and emotions. The transpersonal experiences just sort of give us more a sense of living in vaster parts of the time-space continuum and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So the perinatal is where a lot of the clinical problems originate. But hope that answers that question. Okay, birth by elective cesarean. The pattern in an emergency cesarean is essentially the same as with a vaginal delivery. The infant passes from the often blissful situation in the womb to the extreme suffering of BPM 2, then possibly to the agonizing struggle in the birth canal of BPM 3, and then experiences rescue from the outside as they are surgically removed from the mother's body. The sequence passes from womb to life-threatening birth canal to breakthrough out into the world in an ecstatic release of pressure. The moment of birth and situation in the delivery room are experienced as a dramatic liberation and improvement by the fetus, incomparably better than the life-threatening pressures in the birth canal. And both a vaginal delivery and an emergency cesarean impart a deep sense that we can endure difficult situations and survive. We gain a natural template in our psyches for experiences of extreme pressure or suffering, which are then followed by release and breakthrough. And Stan believes this is nature's way of creating optimism and tenacity in human beings, a feeling that we can survive challenging situations and come out the other side. And this was absolutely necessary for our Stone Age ancestors to persevere in the very challenging conditions of their lives. We can go into a bad situation, but we'll get out. That creates an optimism. Elective cesarean births, on the other hand, present a different sequence with some advantages and disadvantages. The infant moves from the ecstatic situation of the womb directly into the delivery room with experiential polarities of hunger and thirst, dry and wet, heat and cold, and bright light. The world is experienced as significantly worse than the blissful womb. Sometimes elective cesarean-born people feel that they miss some fundamental pattern that is natural and necessary for human development. However, these feelings of omission can be worked through in sessions. Cesarean people may be more ungrounded at times. Vaginal delivery helps us to feel our boundaries. And sometimes elective cesarean people can sort of get deeply involved in ideological battles and struggles and kind of project everything out into the world, as opposed to sort of facing their own contribution into those problems And it's like they don't really have the boundaries to know where they begin and end. On the positive side, an elective cesarean baby will have less birth trauma, pain which can block access to the blissful memory of the womb and spiritual unity with divine consciousness. They may have easier access to mystical and imaginative states and often approach the world as if it were a great friendly womb. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, I'm almost positive was born elective cesarean on Christmas Day, and he was like that. He was like this rock star in his first year of his prime ministership. He was like photo bombing weddings all over the country, and just like shaking hands with everybody. And then he got hurt and criticized. And when they wore traditional Indian clothes, when they got off the plane at India, and they were ridiculed around the world. And then he's just much more reserved. So if people and events do not corroborate this expectation of safety and friendliness, they become deeply hurt and withdraw back into themselves, lacking an innate sense of endurance and capacity to withstand adversity.
Wow, incredible. Thank you. Laura, do you want to, Laura, add anything? Because you did say that you wanted to hear yes from Renn about it, Laura Northrop. Do you want to, is there anything you would like to add, or not necessarily? There is no pressure from me, just asking. Okay. Where are you? There you are.
Right, let me unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Well, there's a lot of different thoughts coming up for me. And one particular, I'm just thinking about this in a way, the birth and death, this whole cycle. I mean, it seems like that is something we, in a way, go through developmentally through the course of our lives, right? And then there's and I just want, I guess I'm curious, Renn, to ask you, it seems like a lot of what we're working on in terms of birth trauma is areas where we get stuck. Is that correct? And it seems like when we talk about getting stuck developmentally at different courses of our lives, that it mirrors and reflects a perinatal trauma. Like, let's say if we get stuck developmentally, as a 9-year-old and as a teenager, that it kind of reflects or mirrors to some birth trauma. I'm just curious about that connection. And yeah.
Absolutely. These are very powerful imprints of success or being stuck. And often, for example, when people get involved in creative projects, like writing a dissertation, an epic process, it can bring up their perinatal feelings. It's like, the driving feelings, but also the resistance and the sense they might not make it. And it's really helpful to do sessions in that situation. We have to do the elbow grease of getting the work done, but work through the emotions. I do my best writing when I feel good, and inspired. And the birth is really like a prototype or a stencil of what life is like for us. Someone with a very short birth might just kind of blast through problems and come out the other side. Somebody with they were wanted and the mom was healthy and supported. They have an ingrained sense of security and safety and belonging. And that nothing can really take that away. Where somebody who, maybe was, they almost were miscarried in the womb, or they were unwanted in the womb, will have an underlying sense of not belonging for the rest of their life until that is processed through. And there are so many hundreds of other nuances that can manifest in people's psychology. So yes.
Yeah, very fascinating. Yeah. I've never tied in the the workings or the process of the prenatal world and how it reflects in our developmental journey, or just our regular life pressures and revelations. It's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting research. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you.
There's one quick question from me, Renn, if you don't mind. We don't want to overexhaust you, but this is such a fascinating subject, really. And in terms of safety and efficacy, holotropic breathing session as opposed to psychedelics, what's your view on this?
Well, the nice thing about breathwork is you can intensify the process or slow the process down just with your breathing. So it feels much safer. Psychedelics, you ingest it, and then it's like you're on the train and you have to ride that train down the rails to the end of the line. There's no way out of it, And so that's good in a way. It can take us through resistances we might otherwise not want to face. To hard places. As far as safety, it's much safer than people realize. If you are healthy enough to do a vigorous physical workout, it's not a problem with your heart or your blood pressure, then unless you have some of those other specific ones like glaucoma, it is much safer than people realize to do psychedelics physically, but you just want to be in the right set and setting. And the most important factor is at least one sitter who you trust, who's had some experience. A good combination is a professional therapist who sits, and then your best spiritual friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
A good friend. Then you've got someone that cares about you and likes you, and also someone who has experience. And if that was a male-female team, or maybe two females, that's a great team. And you can kind of start with smaller amounts of psychedelics. Even cannabis can be used as a psychedelic with eye shades, headphones, and sober sitters. Don't want everyone getting high together. That can be good. MDMA is also a very good way to kind of begin the process because it inflects experiences toward sweeter, positive memories and bonding and trust. And you can also mix that with other ones, like with psilocybin. So you could do a little bit of MDMA combined with psilocybin. So that's a kind of training wheels in a way, and a great beginner way. And for people that have unmet needs for physical contact or were unwanted in utero, just to hold the hands of the sitters could be for the entire session. That can be miraculous for people, healing.
Thank you. Do you have one more question? Because Linda White put her hand up. Do you mind?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I love talking about this. I'm good for as long as you can.
Okay. Usually we schedule this for an hour and a half max, but we don't want to overexhaust you. So Linda, dear, go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renn. I'll try to keep it brief because I don't want to keep you too long, but I have a comment and then a clarification that I wanted to ask. And it's kind of in response to what you just asked, Georgie, is that I was really blessed to work with Stan, and his first wife, Christina, was in long-term recovery. And one of the ITA conferences was in Brazil, and it was Technologies of the Sacred. And it was a really incredible opportunity where, some of the participants and the presenters were really interested, like the ayahuasca and the rituals, and the other half, the presenters were in recovery or about recovery. And it was really lovely to see those two come together. My clarifying question, did I hear correctly when you said that paranoia is a contraindication to either psychedelics or holotropic breath work or both?
Well, it depends how severe it is. Stan, right?
Where the question's coming from too, and that might help because it's I guess there's a question in there because early in the 60s, when the military was unskillfully using psychedelics and that culture, there's kind of a built-in paranoia, with security clearances and that type of thing. So that's what got my attention. And then also, Stan was in Baltimore and he was doing a lot of work with the veterans that had been exposed to that. So when I thought I heard you say that paranoia was a contraindication. It got me very interested.
Yeah, the thing is, if somebody going through a BPM-2 experience and suffering, if they think, the therapist is doing this to me, it's just won't lead to a positive outcome. You have to at least begin with a common frame of reference and empathy and sense of working together, and then you'll be able to go through those difficult moments in a session and come through the other side. So like if somebody presents symptoms and something like my neighbors are aiming some kind of astral rays at me and the government's poisoned my food and the UFOs, I believe in UFOs, but if UFOs are doing something else to me, they, that might not be the best presenting symptoms. But if somebody says, I have problems, I have difficulties, I'm suffering, and I know that there's wounds in my psyche, and I really would love the chance to be able to work through some of these, that is a good presenting symptom. Yeah. I don't know how many soldiers Stan worked with. He worked with victims of the Nazis. I'm not sure about in Baltimore, but I mean, they certainly didn't have therapeutic intentions when they were doing those kinds of experiments.
I think in Baltimore, he was working with schizophrenia and alcoholism. And then, they were using the LSD. And then when it was made illegal, the holotropic work came in. And so it was really the paranoia, because this is partly what my dissertation's about, is with the circulation of psychedelics into the therapeutic realm. I'm really, wanting to be specific with the contraindications, and then the slower process of the recovery process, that we can access those realms of the psyche naturally. Like you said, the drug is just tapping into the unconscious processes. And how do we develop technologies of the sacred that allow us, to reach those aspects in our own psyche? So that's where the question was coming from.
Yeah. Everyone can develop feelings of paranoia and fear in a session. If you're reliving the onset of labor, there can be a sense of the universe opening up. You're dropping down through the floorboards. It can be quite alarming. But if you're in that state all the time and you just see the whole world as against you, it might be hard for a therapist to develop the empathy to work with that person, the rapport.
I don't want to belabor this, but I'm just this is the topic I'm so interested in. A mentor of mine years ago, we knew, in psychosis, even if you allow the person to go fully through the process and they come out the other side, and it can be 24/7 for days, but if they go through the process, they never have another psychotic break. And so I loved what you said about, the need for, hospitals that are really catering to this, that because those are the settings that we need. And, my caution is, all of the unskillful use, or even under controlled settings, if like you said, the therapist isn't aware of these fractures in the psyche or the psychoid layer, which, once we get through our personal, some people can drop right down to the collective unconscious. Albert Hoffman
had a dream of the new Eleusis. That's what we're calling our workshop, toward the new Eleusis, where psychedelic medicines could be used in a responsible way. You know, we're missing out on so much human talent and creativity and problem solving that could emerge from this work, and so much unnecessary suffering, and not to mention medical costs. There, we haven't even scratched the surface of some of the diseases that could potentially be alleviated or even possibly healed through this kind of work. Not all of them, obviously, but some. And that is for people with credentials to find out. Those kind of researchers, you know, I think that we're potentially on the brink of a tremendous rebirth of humanity.
One quick last question. Do you feel in your experience, though, that just through the holotropic breath work, those states can be reached? You know, I'm a little concerned about the resurgence of the psychedelics when I feel humanity has the potential to do it through the holotropic breath work and other technologies, spiritual technologies.
The Grof breathwork, holotropic breathwork, is a standalone, powerful process, and I think it's possibly the most powerful non-drug technique for entering holotropic states, and it will continue to be. They work together. Breathwork sessions can help integrate psychedelic sessions. They're good training for psychedelic sessions, and some people will always want to just do breathwork and not do psychedelics. We can, in breathwork sessions, approach the same levels of intensity, and at certain moments in people's lives, one breathwork session could be a dramatic opening. But you know, the psychedelics tend to be more powerful. It's just like turning up the volume. But you know, the quality of the sitting makes such a difference. And I would way rather do a breathwork session with good sitters than a psychedelic session with lousy sitters, you know.
Point, yeah, that trust again. Yeah.
So I just want to mention here that our Greek workshop, you can see that at rennbutler.com, but don't click on any of the PayPal buttons yet. We haven't worked it out. We're also doing a workshop in Tampa, Florida in May, Grof breathwork and archetypal astrology. So, you know, maybe some of you might be interested in that. And
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Linda.
thanks, Lynn.
It's so amazing and fascinating. And any last comments, questions? I'm auctioning off Renn Butler's wisdom and energy and kindness here. Otherwise, I'm just going to close this. Thank you, Terrio. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and most of all to you, Renn. You are such a well of knowledge and wisdom, and and compassionate kindness. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in a month's time. Same place, same Zoom room, and until then, stay safe and well. All the very best. Take care.
Thank you, Georgie. That it was fun. It was an honor, and I wish me luck. I'm doing a session tomorrow, so.
Ooh, you don't need luck. You have it all. You will be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All the best, everybody. Thank you, Georg. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.